Attention Talking Simpsons listeners, we have a new podcast miniseries exclusively on Patreon right now.
For $5 and up subscribers at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, you get Talk King of the Hill Season 2, Part 1.
That's right, we're returning to King of the Hill once again, putting out 11 new episodes covering the first half of the show's second season. Again, that is patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Be there or be not right.
Cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, recorded in a big metal dome covered in rocks. I'm one of your hosts, XTV dealership manager Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever who is here with me today.
Snickety snick, Bob. It's Henry Gilbert.
And today's episode is the X-Men Evolution episode, Operation Rebirth.
Just don't drop that bomb.
And with that inspiring motivational speech,
let's rock and ride!
And this choice is brought to you by a patron. Isn't that right, Henry?
Yes, it's another premium patron choice. Royce. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. But yes, it was Royce's choice. And thank you so much. This is a classic X-Men show, and I always love doing comic book stuff. Royce's reasoning for it was, quote, I chose this series just because I think it's a pretty fun show, and I think it handled the idea of teenage X-Men way better than any of the movies did. I would agree with that. It's partially the X-Men are your regular superhero group of adults, but it also is a school. And I think some of the best X-Men stuff balances those two of like, this is a place where young X-Men, teens who are just starting to understand themselves, hone their powers. And it's also about like cool guys like Wolverine stabbing people and then cutting their heads off. And this gets you a lot of the balance of it. This episode, especially Operation Rebirth from season 2, though I think in a production way, this is the start of season 3 because the way Disney Plus categorizes it is broadcast season, but like they did 4 13 episode orders, I think.
Okay.
And so this is the 14th episode of season 2. So I think really this is the first one of season 3.
Disney Plus lists everything wrong.
Yes.
Everything is wrong. Except for The Simpsons.
That was the one they couldn't get away with. I mean, the pedants did get them on the aspect ratio.
We were strong enough to break them.
I'm also happy that X-Men Evolution on Disney Plus is unpopular enough that they just keep it at the classic aspect
Thank
ratio.
God. Too much work to ruin it.
Yeah. But yeah, I like Royce picked this one. You know, listeners have heard us do previously X-Men 92, that animated series. And also, if you're a $10 patron, back when me and Bob did like commentaries over videos a long time ago, our last one was for the X-Men Pride of the X-Men pilot movie they did in '89.
I can't believe they sold that on one VHS tape alone.
I mean, hey, if you think of it as like a premium OVA of the X-Men, I think it's worth $20.
It's an ad for the Konami game.
It was like some of the best. They gave Toei the amount of budget that they would spend on like 10 episodes of G.I. Joe to do that
true.
one episode.
It does look good.
But I would say, personally, I didn't really watch this series in the year 2000. It's to take a phrase coined by our friends at Podcast Ride. It's very 2000 core.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Look at the fonts in this title. Oh, man, it is such a 2000 show.
And it's also funny coincidence that we're doing this right after we did Batman Beyond because they are very much of a piece. They are very similar, and their stories are similar, too.
Jim Henson's ex-babies.
But it's funny that, like, my personal history, I've gone into our podcast, we talked about Batman Beyond or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon. In 1999, I was still giving kids WB time of day. But by 2000, I checked back in for Batman Beyond or reruns of my favorite things. But a new show in 2000, somehow then I was 18 and I was like, I can't do it. No more of this.
I think I saw a few of these in passing during anime conventions. I associate this show with waking up at an anime convention with my friends, turning on the TV for a few hours, and just passively watching things while recovering from sleep deprivation. I did enjoy the 92 X-Men animated series, but I liked Batman a lot more. So when this one came on, I wasn't like, this is not like the old one. I hate it.
Yeah.
It was more like, this is trying to be anime, and I already have anime. But I know shows like this do have value, and I was surprised by how good it looks. And then I saw who animated it, and I was like, oh wow, they actually got really good teams to put this together. At least in these seasons I'm watching.
It was anime adjacent, and they paid for better people than Haim Saban did.
Oh man, yeah. After the title, it just goes right into the trash.
Yeah, and then in season 5, they somehow slashed the budget even more. Like, not that this show didn't face a ton of budget issues and executive notes and a bunch of bullshit, but yeah, I did not give this show a chance in the year 2000, and especially like if I had heard about it, like, oh, the X-Men are teens now, except for Storm and Wolverine. After this,
now I want to look up all of these X-Men advertising Pokemon coming up next.
Yes, yeah, I could. I'm gonna dig into that. I found one of Batman Beyond advertising Pokemon, but I need to find one of the X-Men going like, and up after us is Pokemon. What's that show? And then a clip art of a Pokemon jumps on top of Wolverine,
and Professor X fighting one of those psychic Pokemon, probably.
Oh, that writes itself, man. And so I never gave the show a chance, but I did watch several with my husband, who slightly younger than me, so he was in the right age demographic for it in the year 2000, and he really liked it. He admits the X-Men go to high school is a cheesy idea, but it's so true to the characters, and very slowly they pulled in all of the crazy X-Men stuff you enjoy. Plus, it actually did, like, teen angst of the year 2000 really fits the X-Men very well. Yeah. Well, it also helps, too, that when they had Buffy the Vampire Slayer as an inspiration, it actually just turns into a self-feeding loop, because Joss Whedon, the creator of Buffy, he would be the first to tell you, I'm a giant X-Men fan, and I ripped off the X-Men I read in the 80s and put it into Buffy. Not to bring up that jerk,
no.
But look, there's no way to not talk about this show without mentioning Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And also, I think they got into, like, as close as they could, connect how hormones and even queerness works with the idea of a teen being a teen and discovering your powers and all of that.
It is a sexy show.
Oh, it is a horny show. Yes, it is. They got away with some stuff, and the horniness came from one of their, I would say chiefly from one of their top animators in the first 2 seasons, who, but I'll get to that.
The horny history of X-Men Evolution.
But I also really liked watching this because in basically the last over a decade, there's been so little of anything for X-Men, like outside of the comic books. The X-Men were intentionally de-emphasized because Disney didn't own the film rights to it. Now they're going to be re-emphasized because they bought it back by buying Fox. But it was just special to see the X-Men in this. And I think of the X-Men as there's always militarized X-Men who are violent and have guns and all that. So I'm not saying they don't fully fit in with like the gun CIA world of the MCU. But my favorite X-Men are mostly gay weirdos. And I'd rather see that than them join like S.H.I.E.L.D. and have a drone army and stuff.
In the new movie, Wolverine's going to say, enlist, bub.
Yes, yeah. He'd say like, it gets better, bub. And you join. Yeah, they're all going to work for Stark, the Stark Enterprises. But yeah, so this feels like an X-Men show they'd never make now. You could say that about 92 X-Men as well, but this one, they would also not make it because it is so tied to the year 2000. But all right, X-Men. A brief version of the much deeper history we talked about in our 1992 X-Men animated series one we did with Matt McMuscles a couple years ago. Short version is, created in 1963 by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, the original X-Men are a group of teens who were born with superpowers instead of being bitten by a radioactive spider per se, and they very quickly would grow into a soft, barely recognized, but intentional parallel to the civil rights battles going on in the 1960s. Like, it, progressive for its time, but by modern standards, it's like, I guess you can see Professor X as Martin Luther King and Magneto as Malcolm X if you really want to view that from the viewpoint of like someone in 1966. But Marvel always, back then, they were hipper than DC and all that, but they still wanted to they were left of center, but not full on lefty for its time. But the X-Men was never a huge hit. It was like a C-list book for Jack Kirby and Stan, and it eventually sputtered into like non-existence. It was a bunch of reprints, I think, just so they wouldn't lose the trademark. But in the late 70s, the X-Men went through a full revamp where they became much more international, starred weirder characters, and it was this oddball book where a couple of creators, Chris Claremont and John Byrne, could discover new ways of telling stories and try a bunch of stuff that was not the Marvel style at the time. And it turned into the most popular book Marvel had by the end of the 80s. Like, it was stories about a close-knit family of characters, a lot of internal drama, romance and deaths and births and constantly shifting status quo. Like if you just read one issue in one year and an issue a year later, there'd be a completely different like leader, or like, oh, Cyclops quit and now Storm's in charge.
Was Marvel struggling in the 70s?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, the 60s was the boom, and then the 70s was them trying to figure out what they were doing.
I just remember the Bucky O'Hare podcast talking about all the layoffs in the 70s and how one snowstorm destroyed them.
That's right. Yep, it killed, and it fucked up DC even more. So 70s were a rough year for Marvel in general, and just trying out so many things. It was the 80s when they got their groove back, and part of that was the popularity of the X-Men comics by Claremont and Byrne. And by 1990, the X-Men was the biggest book in American comics. The hottest artists were working on Wolverine and the Gang. They were the highest selling comics of all time.
Kids are putting chopsticks between their fingers and running around.
God, yes. Yeah, everybody like, Mom, give me 3 butter knives. No, 6. I need 6. And that all paid off big time for Marvel, Toy Biz, and Saban Entertainment when the X-Men got their own animated series in 1992. Giant ratings hit as well. So sells a ton of toys and is fondly remembered despite some very cheap animation and poor labor practices from Saban Entertainment. And 1997, it ends after 5 seasons and 76 episodes. And it also was all about pulling the most complex stories from the comics. You were meeting the X-Men not when they began, but when they were as established as they were in the comic page in 1992. So they're like, well, we're going to Genosha, this analog for South African apartheid, and we can barely explain it in the show. Or like, here's Gambit, and what is Gambit's origin? Well, the comics haven't said yet either, so we can't say. It's just going to be confusing. Like, it really captures the enjoyment and frustration of being an X-Men reader in the 1990s. But that series ends in 1997, right around the time when Marvel Comics is going through bankruptcy and several hostile business takeovers. Marvel's not doing so hot, and I think that kind of clears the board on a lot of their deals. On the Retronauts we did for Spider-Man, we talked about how there were 2 years of just no Spider-Man games, and it's because like deals ended because the company was in bankruptcy and couldn't sign new deals. And so that's what happened with Saban Entertainment as well. They lost Saban, or they could change things up and not work with Saban anymore. And just as they're reaching 1999 and Marvel is trying to get whatever they can get going to make a money, they sell Fox the X-Men movie rights at honestly too good a deal for Fox. Like, Marvel always regretted for how little they sold the X-Men to Fox, but they were desperate. So there's a movie getting made, directed by Bryan Singer, who super duper sucks. But that movie's getting made, and it's targeted for release in the year 2000. And so you'd be a fool not to have a new cartoon show getting ready in the year 2000 as well. So at the end of Marvel's bankruptcy, they are done with Saban, and they're trying to find a new place, as the story would go that Marvel Productions no longer existed. Like, they didn't have an office anymore. So they had to find a new company to make a deal with, and that would be Film Roman of The Simpsons, King of the Hill,
Garfield and Friends.
Yeah. And so they'd make a deal with Film Roman, and they'd make several shows with Film Roman, though they wouldn't have the deal of just, we only make it with Film Roman like they did with Saban, where it's like, oh no, for 5 years only Saban produced Marvel stuff. That was not the case with Film Roman, but they made a lot more with them after.
A much more competent studio with better consistency across the board.
Still cheaper, sure, but they're more consistent, and they're not known for like an awful asshole running it who wants to like nuke Tehran. so there's that too. Also, their time at Fox is coming to an end. Surprisingly, from the stories, Marvel was just shopping it around. You would think Fox would just be like, we need more X-Men. X-Men's the biggest hit we ever had. And they're releasing the film. And yet, when it comes time to taking all the meetings, Kids WB, I guess, either outbid them or was the only one who wanted it. And so they end up going to Kids WB, which is really weird because that's the home of all the DC stuff.
That is really bizarre. Yeah, you're totally right about that. Maybe it was because at this point in time, everyone was licensing anime to bring over to the States, and funding a big production like this might have seemed not particularly interesting or valuable to them.
Yeah. And I also could see that, like, you know, Kids WB in 1999, they're riding high on that Pokemon. And so they're thinking, like, we can spend. Yeah, let's get those X-Men too. We can do it. Though this show was run in a cheaper way. And as we learned from our Batman Beyond podcast, Jamie Kellner, who ran Kids WB at the time, very into teen shows. The big hit shows on the WB by the year 2000 were Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dawson's Creek, and Charmed. Though Charmed isn't entirely a teen show, but it's teenish.
Yeah.
But in all three of those cases, it's about moody, dark teens having, you know, sexy adventures in hip clothing. And so that's what the year before, Bruce Timm was told, do that for your Batman show. We're canceling your old Batman show. And when these X-Men people came to them, they said for the same thing. They don't want a violent show starring adults. They want a show about teens having adventures while going to high school. And so that's the show they sell. The original working title was Children of the Atom. And internally, there was a lot of fear that fans would think the show was going to be the X-Babies.
I guess the word children is where that factors in. I don't quite get the term where evolution works in, though. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's an odd choice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the movies, they start talking about how the X gene is just like evolution showing its head. So evolution is tied more to the X-Men. It's their name in the 60s was Children of the Atom because they more talked about, like, well, why are mutants appearing? Oh, after the atomic bombs went off in the 40s, it spread this radiation, and that is causing people to develop an X gene, and it creates mutants. But I think since then, they've been more about, like, no, it's Darwinism. Like, that's why humans develop an X gene. But yeah, a lot of fans were worried this was going to be the X-Baby show. And based on what I read at the original outset of season 1, they had a writing crew that mostly got fired halfway through season 1, and you can see there's names who were the writers of the first 8 episodes, and then after that you get the names of the people who wrote all the rest of the episodes.
Is there a reason on the record that the writing staff was just canned like that?
I can find some I'll also say thank you to the website. I guess it's called Toon Zone, because in the year
Toon Zone is a great resource.
In 2003, they did a ton of interviews with the people who worked on this show. Sadly, like, half of them are not archived, and so
that sucks. I will tell you, I think we cited it before, but Toon Zone in the early to maybe late 2000s, creators and other folks in the industry would just post on the message boards there and answer questions.
Yeah,
before Twitter.
I know, before Twitter, and before people could get, like, in trouble with their bosses if they revealed something. It's so funny just seeing this, like, Wild West thing. I read several where they're just like, well, we wanted to do this, but the network said no. And I was like, wow, right now, I know tons of people that would love to say on Twitter, well, I wanted to do this cool thing and the network said no, but they know the network's actually watching them when they say that, and it's going to get them in trouble. So, but yeah, basically it sounded like they had a writing staff to develop the show and they weren't liking the results. And then they brought in, like, the two main head writers / showrunners for the show took it over and changed it. That's why the first half of season 1 is this kind of very slow and also very, like, low stakes introduction of all the characters. It's like, meet Kitty Pryde at her school. She's sad. Like that. And instead, in this case, it starts really ramping up after the start of it. So the showrunner I want to talk about is Craig Kyle. He was brought in as a creative consultant early in season 1, and I think pretty much took it over and became the main creative force on the show, though he shared it with a lot of people. But Craig Kyle, he had only a couple writing credits before joining on this, and relatively new hire to Marvel. But you can tell he has a real appreciation for, like, the characters and the history of Marvel Comics. Like, he's still very active in Hollywood to this day, but that doesn't mean that he silences himself on what he felt on the production of X-Men Evolution. Because I found several tweets from him explaining how he reflects on the show. This was last year in 2020 was the 20th anniversary of this show's debut. Unbelievable. But behind the scenes, he cited a tug of war between the stories Marvel Studios wanted to tell and the ones Kids WB forced us to tell. Craig explained it as, here's how most of our Kids WB Notes review sessions started. Okay, so how do we address any of this nonsense and not kill the episode in the series? And lastly, he explained the production of the show as, we injected as much of the real X universe as we could into the series while secretly digging a series-long story tunnel to escape the show Kids WB was forcing us to make.
Oh, very clever.
So yeah,
I appreciate that.
You can see over time characters really take over in the show and other characters fall to the background. One Craig Kyle really hated that was forced upon them was the creator for this show character Spike.
Boy, real 2000 energy with that character.
I know. Would you believe that there wasn't a skateboarding kid who's like Storm's cousin or nephew?
I was talking about this with my wife Nina, who's been on the show before, but Spike was a reimagining of an existing character.
Yes. So in late 90s X-Men, there was a really cool character who was also a playable character in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Marrow, who is this cool pink lady with like bone spikes. She can make bones just fly out of her, and she can just like, here's some more bones, wham, just throws them at people. She was cool.
Boy, no wonder Nina likes her.
Man. Oh, yes. I can see Nina would think Marrow's very cool. I also think Marrow's real cool. Well, it also helped that Marrow's first appearance in the comics was meeting with Spider-Man. And so I was like, oh, man, her and Spider-Man. And also she's drawn very anime style by X-Men artist Joe Madureira, the guy who would go on to create Battle Chasers and the Darksiders video games. So her style is very like video gamey, anime influenced, and she's so cool. And they just took that thing from her and made up a new guy. And he said it was very much like enforced by the network. Like Kyle was very clear of like, I hate Spike. Spike sucks.
He seems like a real Roy.
He is a Roy. He's very, and it's also too bad because that Spike is this like network mandated character, because for as diverse as the X-Men is, they don't have a lot of African American males, major ones in their history. Storm is one of like the most famous X-Men there is, so it's not to say like they're undiverse, but when I was trying to think like, oh, well, instead of Spike they could have used, and then I could not remember one African American male character that predated him in the X-Men. I mean, there's guys like Sunspot who are in the series, but he's Brazilian. He's not African American.
On the topic of diversity, though, what the hell accent does Nightcrawler have? It is all over the place in this show.
Well, it's meant to be German, but
really,
yes,
I am shocked to hear that was German. I was like, wait, is he Asian? Is he Indian? What's happening? But German, that I did not hear German in that at all.
Yeah, I know. It's he's
recast.
He is supposed to be that. It's a bit much
German.
Oh wow, I loved it. Yeah, he should be saying. I wish they just had to be stereotypical. Be like, ooh, wunderbar, Fraulein.
Yeah. Come on, man, play it up. I thought he was Asian. I'm sorry.
Well, there's also some people had issues with other characters being recast as different backgrounds. Like the character of Toad in this show, he's British in the comics, but here they're like, nah, he's just like an American kid. And the villain of Avalanche, who's in the Brotherhood, he's Greek in the show, or in the comics, but in the show, he's also just an American kid. So in some ways, they wanted to add diversity, but they also take diversity away that was built into these characters, which, like, again, if you look at the Marvel pantheon of characters, so many white people in there. The X-Men was for decades the most diverse. Like you'd have like one black guy on the Avengers or like one woman on the Avengers.
And then Rogue is no longer Southern unless she is, and the actor is really messing this up.
No, I don't think. I mean, they really played down her Southernness, I'd say. It's as opposed to highly played it up in the 92 cartoon. Gambit appears later in the series, and he's not as extremely Cajun as he was on the 92 show. But yes, another problem they had on the show was one we talked about on Batman Beyond as well. It was produced post-Columbine.
Uh-oh.
And they
Get him out of the school. Get him out of the school.
Well, yeah. So, one, they were very reticent to have any real violence inside of a school, and as much violence as they could would be toned down, which is like, this is the X-Men. It's a show at its core about action figures fighting each other, and you want to buy those action figures to make them fight yourself.
I bet execs were like, can all the fights be food fights?
Yeah. They had so many. There are some bad food fights in the show.
Oh, my God.
Well, and not to mention that, too, they also... romance and dating is such a big part of the X-Men, and on the X-Men 92 show that like there's so many people who love Rogue and Gambit because those two are such a couple in the 92 animated show.
We've all seen the meme of Wolverine looking at that picture.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's him thinking about his best friend Morph. Like, don't you put sexuality.
That's brotherly love, right?
Yes. Well, technically Morph is genderless. Well, Morph mostly presents as a man, but with his shape-shifting powers, gender is kind of meaningless to Morph.
So what a progressive show.
Yeah, well, they never put it that way. Morph definitely was a guy, but yeah. So romance had to be really toned down as well, and also that edict on lightening things up. The show debuts fall 2000. By the next fall, they then get more edicts of like, can you not destroy buildings as much?
Ooh, no.
Can they not fly a plane anymore? Like
that 1-2 punch of Columbine and 9/11 just ruined kids' TV for at least 5 years.
Action all got so bad because you couldn't do anything. I mean, action had been toned down our whole childhoods. Like, there's definitely that the Simpsons episode Itchy and Scratchy and Marge is about how you can't watch Popeye cartoons where people get punched, and like that was our childhood. And now the next childhood was like, does this trigger children into thinking of 9/11?
I mean, modern kids just lived through 500,000 plus people dying. Let's make the cartoons as violent as possible.
Yes.
These kids are inured to just horror in front of their eyes every day.
They need release. They just need to see a character punch somebody. And also, they apparently got notes behind the scenes of like, don't disrespect authority too much. Like, don't have them run from the cops.
Jeez.
Yeah. From reading the vintage interviews during the production of the show, sounded like it was very frustrating for all the people on it. Though Christopher Yost, the writer who we talked a lot about in Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes, Yost is often credited as like the creator of the character X-23, the girl Wolverine. Christopher Yost is always very quick to say, no, it was Craig Kyle who came up with it, because they had an edict from the, as you might not guess from watching this episode, Kids WB actually wanted to de-emphasize Wolverine most of the time because they wanted Wolverine for toys, but they did not want a Wolverine only episode because that's an adult having action fun, not the kids.
And kids could play with knives.
And so Kyle's idea was like, how the fuck do I get a teen Wolverine in this show without like de-aging Wolverine? I know, a girl clone of Wolverine who has claws of her own. And so
Girlverine.
They create Girlverine, who she has 2 claws in each hand, 1 claw each foot, and all the powers of Wolverine. Plus she's a Latina, and she was a huge takeoff for the series. Definitely when I first heard about her, I was like, Girlverine.
That's not actually her name though, right?
No. She's called Wolverine or just X-23 or Laura, I believe her name is, or Laurel. But yeah, like I underestimated her. She became the Harley Quinn of this series. And by the end of the decade, she was in the comics and had a big role in the Logan film that everybody loved, which have you seen Logan yet?
I've
Bob?
not seen Logan. I've been told it's the one superhero movie I might enjoy.
I think you will. If you haven't seen it with your wife yet, it's also kind of a Western. And if I don't know if she's seen it either, but I think you guys will.
I think she has, but when she hears I haven't seen it, she'll watch it with me.
And so, yes, that's Craig Kyle, but he wasn't the only showrunner of the show. The official head writer of the show was Greg Johnson, who I feel bad for his Google results because it's also that's the name of a prominent white supremacist in Europe, unfortunately. Not the same person. But,
just like the comedian Matt Walsh. You can never Google him without getting the evil Matt Walsh.
And I had a coworker who I felt so bad for. His name was Paul Ryan.
Oof.
And
I think he's okay now, though.
Yeah, now Paul Ryan is just, he's being evil behind the scenes, just cashing out.
The tax cut passed. His work here is done on this earth. He can just go on to the next plane of evil.
And just he can celebrate and not have to be on TV all the time. But anyway, this Greg Johnson was the head writer of X-Men Evolution. He had gotten there because he had actually written for a couple cartoons before getting on Biker Mice from Mars, which was a Marvel Productions Invasion show. That got him into the Marvel world. And in the mid-90s, Saban Entertainment drafting off the success of X-Men and Spider-Man, did 3 syndicated cartoons too, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and the Hulk, and Greg Johnson wrote for all of those. He was very knowledgeable not only on how to write cartoons based on Marvel stuff, but the Marvel world in general, and he is credited a lot for finding the way to thread the tone of the teen bullshit that they were asked to do. And he also, Johnson in older interviews, was very clear of like, I always wish we had more time, more money. The budget shrank every year and they had to make do. And on top of that, he said standards and practices was just very annoying. And
well, the clock was ticking on WB anyhow.
Yes, yeah. I think by the time the show ended in 2003, Kids WB was like not really a thing anymore. And now WB's not a thing anymore.
It's very sad.
But yeah, Johnson, he'd go on to work on a lot more Marvel stuff right after this. Meanwhile, on the art side, 3 names I want to talk about. 2 we've covered quite a lot already. The 2 biggest names behind the scenes animation side were Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyle vets Frank Power and the late Boyd Kirkland. We talked about both of those guys in our Avengers podcast last year quite a lot. Short version is that both of them were big name guys from Batman the Animated Series who, unlike a lot of the folks, they didn't stick around in the Timiverse. They went off to get big deals on separate shows themselves. So after the first year of Batman, Frank and Kirkland, they went to Gargoyles. They just kind of bounced around from places. And so this is where they ended up here. Boyd Kirkland also was very key in developing the story in the early seasons. And after the writers reshuffle, still was sticking around as a writer too. So he was both writer and artist. And meanwhile, Power had a great style for action and sleek lines that really helped with the show style. All of his strengths that also came through on Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. It also helps with like, oh yeah, you guys had like no money like that. But the big name I want to talk about is character designer and director in the first 2 seasons of the series, Stephen E. Gordon, who really fleshed out the appearance and also like the movements of the cast. Like if you guys just look up Stephen E. Gordon's pencil tests for the show, you can see so much of what he put into it character-wise. He's like, no, Wolverine would walk like this, and then Beast would walk like this, and Nightcrawler would walk like this. Like he is an incredibly skilled animator and character designer, and they were very lucky to have him. Apparently, he had been friends with Kirkland, and Kirkland's like, hey, you want to work on this superhero show? And like Gordon was not a comic book guy necessarily. But what he is an industry vet who is still active and has 4 decades of experience in there. And he got his start under who but Ralph Bakshi.
Oh, like many men.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that if he's been active this long, if you were an animator in your early 20s in California, Ralph Bakshi probably tried to hire you. And Gordon is one of those amazingly talented animators who learned so much from Bakshi, especially rotoscoping and all of that style.
Yeah, you could definitely tell how this is a post-Batman the Animated Series show just because of how that informed the look of this. Not necessarily how stylized it is, but in terms of let's make the characters not pulled from the page like the first series was.
Yeah.
And yeah, to be fair, series after Batman, we're still doing that. Like we just recorded an episode about Savage Dragon. It is right off the page, and the animators can't really handle that.
Yeah, I mean, for X-Men Evolution, what Gordon and his team were dealing with were like, well, we already just had the thing that looks like the comic books you buy off the shelf. Like, what, we can't really deal with that. Well, and fortunately though for them, in the year 2000 as well, Marvel launched the Ultimate X-Men comics, and that has stylistic similarities to Evolution that I think both were kind of communicating with one another. But when I bring up Gordon's Ralph Bakshi background, that's where, if you notice, especially in the opening to this show, and there's some other episodes that have it, there is occasionally very good key animation, like incredibly fluid animation that also is very clearly rotoscoped, that Gordon was usually the primary animator on. Where did he get that skill? Well, he was the lead character animator on films like Fire and Ice and Cool World.
Wow.
So, yes, he
was tracing over Kim Basinger.
If you were turned on by Hollywood in Cool World, he was the lead animator on that. And I found some other pencil tests with like there is a very well done animation scene of Shadowcat and Rogue dancing together, and like it's Rogue learning to like let loose and dance. Come on, let's have some fun.
God.
And there are some very cool world. I'm not saying they were hypersexualized, but in the movement is a very cool world movement.
Speaking of comics, I remember Cool World before it's released was just on the back page of every comic.
Oh yeah,
that
you're
full
right.
page ad, and then the next year it'd be Mallrats.
Right, God, man, that must have subsidized so much of Marvel, just the Cool World money like that. I mean, that's who you should advertise to. Like, Cool World is like, are you a horny guy who likes comic books?
Of course you are.
Yeah.
I was stupid for asking.
But that's kind of like Gordon's is very skilled at action too. I'm not just saying he's only a horny animator, but he is good at drawing women moving, I'll say, and guys too, And so yeah, he was a director on the first half of the show, and I think he definitely said like he tried his best with the TV budget to express character. Like he mentions that he did those pencil tests too because he's like, I don't know how much we can trust the overseas guys, so let me just show them like here is just a walk cycle. Please stick to that. Like that. But that's the kind of thing that you don't really see those for a lot of big shows. Like, I mean, definitely on X-Men 92, I think they just like, here's a storyboard, just fucking ship them.
Yeah.
Like they can do layout in Korea.
You figure out how to make Cyclops dance around. Not my problem.
I believe they did boarding and layout in the U.S. as well.
Okay.
So they were based out of L.A. and Film Roman, but that's not where the voices were. I don't know, Bob, if you recognize yet Vancouver accents in the voice acting here.
Vancouver, thankfully free of accents. I don't have to hear those in my life. I will say, I'll bring her up again. My wife, Nina, there's some weird Vancouver vowels I'm not a fan of. Like, the delicious Italian meal pasta.
Yes.
Pasta.
Pasta.
Don't care for that. I'm going to have to get used to it.
You're just going to have to order pasta whenever.
That's about as far as it goes. It's not like we're on Eek the Cat or whatever.
But yes, these are a Vancouver voice acting staff because I think that, saved them some money. Not to say, I have to say this every time, just because they are the cheaper Vancouver voice actors does not mean they are worse actors.
Except for Nightcrawler. Fire him.
Yes, okay, fine.
Bad job.
Sure. But mostly, these are quality voice actors based out of the Ocean Group of Vancouver, BC, which is a difference. The 92 X-Men show, that was recorded in Toronto. So they're trading Toronto for Vancouver.
I'd say that's a little
voice
cheaper.
Actors. I think it was. Yeah. I mean, but these are some of the best folks who worked on, if you were a, viewer of the original Dragon Ball Z dub in America or North America, then you'll recognize some of the voices. Also, if you're a watcher of Ranma 1/2 like I was, you'll recognize some folks. I'll name a few of them here. Cyclops was voiced by Kirby Morrow, who was the original Goku. So if you think of that, our OG Goku voice. And Scott McNeil, voice acting superstar Scott McNeil is Logan.
Whenever he talks, I just hear Piccolo.
Yep, he's Piccolo. He's also Rat Trap and Dinobot in Transformers Beast Wars, if you were a fan of that show. But yeah, Scott McNeil, so good as Wolverine, and I wonder if he felt a certain Canadian pride voicing the Canadian X-Man, the most famous fictional Canadian maybe ever. I can't. Who's more famous than Wolverine as a fictional Canadian?
Oh God, he's got to be it.
At least from my American viewpoint. Well, I mean, he's got Dudley Do-Right beat for sure. Like maybe in 1990, you'd say Dudley Do-Right could be more famous than Wolverine.
A modern child would know what Wolverine is. He would not know what a Dudley Do-Right is.
Jean Grey is voiced by Venus Terzo, who also on Transformers Beast Wars voiced Black Arachnia. We have David Kaye. He voices Xavier. He has been in a million things, most famously since the beginning, and still he is the voice of Clank in Ratchet and Clank.
Okay, he's got a pretty good Patrick Stewart impersonation here.
Yeah. When also speaking of Sony-related folks, Magneto shares the voice of current Kratos of the God of War series, Christopher Judge, who he's really great. I liked the 2018 God of War game, though I only played about 6 hours of it, but it was a good 6 hours. But like amazing acting and motion capture by Christopher Judge and Kratos there. Like he really put himself out there. So yes, Vancouver anime voice actors working on this show. I believe Kirkland talked about that in the first season. He would fly out to Vancouver once a week to oversee the acting
that sounds
sessions. Great. For him, it wasn't so fun. He was working on a show in LA and once a week had to fly out to Vancouver.
It's a great chill city.
But eventually he said he created a digital line, and so he could just direct the voice acting over the phone back then, which, in the year 2001, it kind of advanced. But Oh, and one other one I wanted to shout out too is that Double D, Ed of Ed, Ed, and Eddie, he voices an electric kid in this shows. Like, he's not a cool X-Man, but whenever he talks, it's so distracting. It's like, that's Double D. He's just like, hey, I got this. Let me do this, Wolverine.
Is that his only voice then?
It might be. It's, well, that's the only voice he was using in X-Men, and that's...
He's a real Bobcat Goldthwait.
So we did talk about how this is an anime-adjacent show. Overseas production was handled by 2 studios that listeners will be pretty familiar with. We talked about him in the Scooby-Doo Zombie Island movie. This is the next project that was handled by Mook, anime-ish production company Mook out of Japan.
And I also saw, you'll probably get to this, but Madhouse and Dr. Movie in the credits.
Yeah, it's Madhouse in quotes. I mean, so Mook did 24 episodes, and the other 28 of the 52 total were handled by Madhouse. And I think they kind of alternate the two. But we talked about this in our Boondocks one, and it's true in this too. For both of them, they did hire Madhouse, and I think definitely in both cases, after Americans saw Ninja Scroll, they're like, I want Madhouse. But I think for the budgets they were offering Madhouse is like, well, we have 2 Korean studios that we send things to, so this will be Madhouse. But not to say that the Korean subcontractors for Madhouse, known as DR and Dr. Video and MOI, or Moi, I'm going to say MOI, they're really good, and there's occasionally like they're doing amazing for the shit budget I'm sure they were handed.
It's a good looking show. You have to get over the early digital stuff where the colors are a little garish, you know, they have a lot of learning to do still in the year 2000.
But man, there's like, if you watch, just look up like the original Logan and X-23 fight, and there's some actually really good choreography in there. There's a bit where they're fighting, she cuts a column, just like a disc out of a column, and then in one fluid motion goes slice, turn, kicks it out, and hits Wolverine with it. It's like, there's actually really good choreography to it. Like Madhouse, occasionally they would just pop in with like, whoa, that's really good animation. How do you like that? But it's not like when you watch, say, a Tiny Toons TMS where it's just incredible quality all the time. But they were smart to go with anime production companies for this so they could get, like, Saban would have even heard the cheap version of the Madhouse amount of money and be like, what the? No way.
Is there a country we haven't even heard of to send this to?
Yeah.
A new country, perhaps.
A new country. Are there people on the moon who would work cheap? Can I exploit them? So yes, over the seasons, the story and scope would grow much bigger to include a lot of the more popular stories and heroes on the show that would often eventually please the most ardent X-Men fans who originally thought it was going to be the X-Men babies. But I mean, it did good ratings, but never Pokemon level ratings. Like, it was not close to Pokemon in it. But it did have also like a series of toys too, that I think they did 3 series of toys, which that's a sign that it at least was modestly successful. Not like when we talk about Bucky O'Hare and it's like, well, they did one run and then canceled ones in production, which tells you how well it did.
I saw there was a comic and I was surprised that it was a failure.
Yeah, well, tie-in comics, you know, they thought that they would always do better, but if you're a super comic fan, you know just to buy the real comics. You don't want to read the things that adapt a universe that... Well, also, if you're a big comic fan, the most important thing is that everything you read counts, because if it doesn't count, then you wasted your life, right?
I guess this is an alternate universe then, correct?
Yes, that's why it's like, well, why am I spending my $3 on this when I could read the X-Men stories that count? So yeah, the comic didn't do too well, but the series, it did pretty all right. They did 4 seasons. They got to the 52 episode mark, which we talked about on Batman Beyond and on Superman. Once both of those hit 52, Kids WB was like, we're good. No more. We got enough to rerun it. No need for another season.
Now you're a weekday show with no new episodes.
Yep. Yeah. We'll just run it until we don't anymore. And so, frustratingly to the creators of the show, they were canceled as they were really ramping up. The last season was supposed to have a much longer arc for Apocalypse. They basically had a 3-part finale that was turned into 2 episodes, I think. And the last episode is incredibly rushed. But there's a really interesting bit in the last scene of Charles Xavier goes like, I see things that will happen in the future. And it's their way of just the creators saying, we'd have done these. Like, this would have been season 5 if we could. So here's your tease of the Dark Phoenix saga. We couldn't do it. So yes, the series ended 2003. Several of the writers and artists on it would keep working at Marvel, including Craig Kyle and Greg Johnson would move on to the next X-Men series, Wolverine and the X-Men, which I think is less loved, but they tried to fix some of the problems they had.
Was that tied into the Wolverine movies or, as a result of those launching?
I think Wolverine was starting to star in movies and so be the lead and stuff in 2009. So I could see that that's why they made it Wolverine and the X-Men.
I have horrible memories of that Wolverine movie because the only issue of EGM I made it into was the last one that had a horrible, awful Wolverine on the cover. It was rancid, and that I still have it to this day. But the only issue, I'm on the last page, so I killed EGM.
It is a artifacted close up of a screenshot of that video game.
Mandated by somebody.
But that Wolverine video game is actually good. It's a good, not great, good. You'll never get to play an M-rated Wolverine game ever again.
Oh no, that can't happen.
But yeah, so that's where those guys went to right after. They put Marrow in that show. They're like, let's do right by Marrow. She's going to be in Wolverine the X-Men. Since then, Craig Kyle and Greg Johnson, they actually have a brand new series that they're heading up. They do the Pacific Rim anime-ish show that's on Netflix now, which looks all right. And it's fun to see them still sticking with we adapt a movie with an anime company and then put it out now on Netflix instead of Kids WB.
Hey, they're good at it.
And the series X-Men Evolution did get some DVDs. There actually were good DVD extras for season 1 and 2. By the time they put out season 3, the series had been canceled, so I think none of the creators were able to be around to do extras. But really good extras on the first couple seasons that fortunately are on YouTube. And it kind of was unavailable for a while, but then Disney Plus launched and they needed everything, and so boom, X-Men Evolution was there from day one, which I could not believe. It had 3 X-Men shows I'd never watched before that were all there.
There are so many Marvel shows I didn't know existed that are just happening on Disney Plus now.
An unbelievable number of Marvel shows. There's hundreds of episodes of Spider-Man I have never watched. But I will say, if you think that there'll be a revamp of the X-Men Evolution universe, I wouldn't hold your breath. Maybe you'd get to see one in a comic book someday, but as a cartoon show, Marvel hasn't done anything with X-Men yet. But if they do, it's going to be big and their own thing, and it will not be relitigating old history.
I bet if there's a new animated show, maybe they'll go through a portal and meet some of these people or something like that, because the kids that watch us are now 30 or in their 30s.
That's true,
and they have money to burn.
I could see a Spider-Verse style thing, or every Turtle show now just has to have at least one episode where the Turtles meet the 80s Turtles.
Hey, tell your parents to get in the room.
Mom and Dad, they'll like this one. Why is Daddy crying? Well, that's his Leonardo, son. But yes, so that's X-Men Evolution, the history of it. When we come back, we are going to talk about the Season 2 episode, Operation Rebirth.
The time has come for a change.
Get in there, now!
Prepare to evolve. Bring it on. And now, Kids WB presents the world premiere of X-Men Evolution.
World, I am an X-Man. Here is where I make my stand. Mutation flows from my hands. Forces are in my command. Got power for hours that you wouldn't believe. Mutant is the way it's gonna be. We're going off. We're going off. We're going off. And I'm going off too. We're going off.
X-Men Evolution. All new next Saturday at 10:30, 9:30 Central and Pacific.
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert, and I'm calling to you via Cerebro on this week's podcast.
Hey, it's Bob Mackey, and snickety snick, that's my impression of Jason Mewes thinking about Wolverine.
And welcome to the break. This week's episode where we talk about X-Men Evolution was so much fun. It was chosen by premium patron Royce. Thanks so much. You always have great picks. And if you want to be a really cool supporter of us just like Royce, there's a very easy way to do that.
Yeah, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up. At the $5 level, you'll get a lot of stuff for your money, including all these episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That is over 100 bonus podcasts, which include all of our limited miniseries. The most recent one that's happening right now is Talking of the Hill Season 2 Part 1. That is 11 new episodes of Talking of the Hill, our King of the Hill retrospective series, happening behind the paywall. Other things that exist behind that paywall are Talking Critic, Talking Futurama, which is now a monthly series, Talking Mission Hill, and so much more. There's interviews, there's bonus episodes, so much is happening. If you like our voices, you're missing a lot of podcasts at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And there is also a $10 level. If you sign up for that, you get all the $5 stuff, of course, but also access to one mega-long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob, you're talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. Now, you listeners on the free feed, I'm sure you've heard of it. Just last week, you got to hear me and Bob's extended preview on the history of Shrek. It was 20 years of Shrek, and we Shrek'd it up on that Shrekful episode. We had so much fun, and you got to hear a tiny bit of it. But if you wanted to hear the over 4 hours of chat about Jeffrey Katzenberg's crown jewel of the DreamWorks animation, you got to sign up at the $10 level to hear it all. You'd also hear our gigantic back catalog, almost 3 years of What a Cartoon movies, covering films as diverse from Akira to Tiny Toons, How I Spent My Vacation, to Beavis and Butthead Do America, and tons more. I would say over 120 hours of podcast at this point, just from What a Cartoon Movie, and that doesn't even count all the other cool stuff you'd get from the $5 level benefits included in a $10 subscription. So please sign up today to see it all at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you've never signed up for Patreon before, it's so easy to do. And once you sign up, you're given a code. You just drop that code into whatever you use to listen to podcasts, and that way you can download all of our bonus podcasts alongside your free podcast as part of your podcasting lifestyle. And Patreon also has an app for any smart device you might have. You can download our bonus podcast that way as well. But either way you do it, it is so easy to access all of the content waiting for you behind the paywall at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So why don't we get back to our X-Men Evolution talk, and you're going to enjoy this whether you're a member of the Brotherhood or if you're an X-Man.
My name is Professor Charles Xavier, and it's my job to teach gifted young people how to use their abilities. It can be difficult, but without my guidance, they could easily stray down a dark path. I'm Professor X, and these are the X-Men. X-Men Evolution. World premiere next on Kids WB.
That was the opening to X-Men Evolution you got to hear there. And this episode, Operation Rebirth, 14th in the season. My guess is it's the first in season 3 production, but I could be wrong. Also, I mean, they could have ordered 26 episodes of season 2, so there might only be like 3 production seasons. That I could not find out. But yes, this episode, the story is credited to head writer Greg Johnson and the late Boyd Kirkland, but it's written by Bob Forward.
I know who this guy is.
Okay, did we cover him in a thing?
We might have, but I do remember who he is because I was listening to the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. He is essentially the creator of the Legend of Zelda cartoon in that package, and he wrote every episode.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Man, Bob. Oh, did you also remember, because it's like, Bob Forward forward.
It's a guy named Bob. And also they had him on one of the episodes to talk about one of the things he wrote.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he was a Deke man. He deked it up in his first gig was actually, at least on IMDb, was He-Man. He wrote the He-Man Xmas special and also the She-Ra movie. He's the credited writer on that. Then he went on to previous What a Cartoon subjects, Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, and also Savage Dragon and Captain Planet, and still has credits up to 2018. He is a big-time Toon vet who, yes, from the sound of it, now I want to look up that interview he did with the our pals at the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
And regrettably, he did write some episodes of the Mario cartoon as well.
Hey, look, we all do things for money. If I could go back in time and instead of writing a bad listicle, I wrote a bad episode of the Mario Brothers cartoon, I would much rather do that.
People will be talking about that.
Yeah. Could you imagine 20 years from now where we're being interviewed by some 30-something podcasters who were like, that list you did of the funniest Mario fails.
They'll be doing it at my funeral.
And the director of this episode, Gary Graham, another vet of the 80s who got into Marvel animation with, he worked on like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. He worked in the first season of Batman the Animated Series as well, Superman the Animated Series, and also boarded on several classic Simpsons. He was a storyboarder on Marge Be Not Proud,
Oh, nice.
Sweet Seymour Skinner's Badass Song, and Burns' Air.
Some great looking episodes.
Though, sadly for him, or maybe he doesn't want to be a director, these are his only directing credits on X-Men Evolution. Like he has some still pretty recent credits, but he's mostly a story guy. Now I think more in theatrical. But yeah, so that's Gary Graham. And so yes, as I mentioned before, surprisingly behind the scenes, dedicated Wolverine episodes like this were apparently much harder to approve with the network because Wolverine is a very violent character. And also he's an adult, and the Kids WB edict was, we don't want shows for adults, we want kids.
Also, the subject material is pretty it's pretty intense for a kids cartoon because they go to Auschwitz.
Yes, yeah.
And liberate a concentration camp.
Yeah, though I will say that's true to the comics.
I mean, it is true, but it is, I mean, it's cool that they are portraying it on the screen, but it's also bizarre that they're like, yeah, you're in enemy territory, and who are you fighting? No, don't ask. Why is there a ticking clock on these prisoners of war? Best that we don't talk about it.
I think that's why they have Rogue give a line of like, why do we have to care about World War II history? Like, I think they're trying to frame it as edutainment. Maybe they even got away with like, well, technically this is a historical lesson episode, so maybe it counted toward their like educational programming for the year quota.
They don't teach you anything.
I mean, they teach you that America's good and that some people were bad. Well, there's something they could interrogate in this episode, but they don't, which is Nightcrawler Kurt being German.
Yeah.
He could actually be like, oh, my people did this. But I guess the more you dig into it, the less of a fun cartoon show for selling action figures.
It's really just a Wolverine adventure, and Rogue and Nightcrawler are there to give color commentary.
I think they're there just to be allowed to do it. If it was Wolverine just doing it by himself, then I don't think it would have been approved. So you need to give the kids a reason to come with them. And this also loosely adapts a classic X-Men comic by Claremont and Jim Lee. It's Uncanny X-Men 268 if you want to pull it out. It's a very indulgent one-off comic where they were like in between stuff, and it really reads like Jim Lee said, I want to draw cool Captain America stuff. And so he did, and it's a flashback story of the 40s where Logan is teamed up with a Captain America.
So this is canonical that Wolverine knew Captain America in World War II.
Yep. Yeah.
For some reason, I didn't know Wolverine was that old.
Yes. Yeah. Wolverine, I believe canonically now, was born in like 1903 or something.
Wow.
Like he has those regenerative powers, you know.
That's
so
true.
He's actually in X-Men 268. It was a big deal, as actually was treated as a major thing, to confirm that Wolverine had been alive in World War II and knew Captain America. But if you read the comic, I just flipped through it in Marvel Unlimited, and it's mainly just an excuse to have a bunch of cool poses of Wolverine and Captain America beating up people, and then like a very indulgent 2-page spread where Black Widow is in her underwear. And I'm just like, why is that needed?
Do they draw swastikas?
In that they do.
Okay,
Yes. In
I
the
was just
comics, they
curious.
do,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to see them in this kids' cartoon. I'm just curious, could they get away with that then?
Why I remember on the Marvel trading cards of the 90s, when they did the Red Skull card, there's a big ass swastika behind him because it's like, it is certainly not a celebration of the swastika or making him the good guy. But it was more just like, I think they would have viewed it as historical accuracy, or perhaps also like from a design standpoint, it's like, well, how did we make this guy look as evil as possible? well, a blood red flag with a swastika on it probably does that. I think there's a little more sensitivity to that now, yes. But, you know, these were comics drawn by guys who grew up reading Sergeant Rock and Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos that just made adventures out of fighting the Nazis that were made by guys who like literally did, like Jack Kirby fought the Nazis.
It's true.
In Europe and then came home and drew drawings of fighting Nazis.
He can draw as many swastikas as he wants.
He earned that right. Yes.
You have to kill at least one Nazi.
And yes, this also is the only episode of the series where a non-mutant Marvel hero appears on screen. Captain America did not return for another episode. Nick Fury does return in other episodes, but he's kind of iffy of like, well, he's not really a superhero. He's like a secret agent. But I think this was their backdoor pilot of like, hey, we could do like an Avengers show set in the same universe, you know. Didn't work out for them. An Avengers show got sold later. But yes, the episode begins with Wolverine driving around on his very toyetic motorcycle.
This is not the XTV that I can buy.
No, those that's later. This is his. He has two motorcycles, one for when he's in costume and when he's not. And I looked this up too in the full set of X-Men Evolution toys. 5 different toys that come with a motorcycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want the battle damage one.
You can get 3 Wolverines with a motorcycle. No, I think it's 4 Wolverines and 1 Sabretooth.
I want his claws to actually work as a rearview mirror.
That would be so cool. God, yeah. The Sabretooth one literally has like a ponytail on it to reflect his tail, I guess. Well, actually, Sabretooth does not have a tail. I know. I misspoke there.
I'm deleting my comment.
But yes, it does start a fun little chase scene where I think you're supposed to think it's Weapon X hunting him because they're like, hey, we identified a skeleton. It's Wolverine, all right. And yes, it's a cute chase scene. Wolverine looks behind him in his claws. As he has to do, he can use his claws as a tool, but not to actually stab anybody. And so like he cuts down a tree and makes a guy crash.
You know what? I'm surprised they never went for the Akira skid in this scene.
Yeah. I have to think they do an Akira skit at some point in this series. I'm going to look it up after this. We'll see. But also, they stole so much stuff from other movies in this show that is really fun. Like, I think of this scene with all these, like, Humvees bouncing around. I feel like they watched The Rock before
Oh,
this.
yeah. It's very well animated, too.
It's real well done. Yeah, the episode right before this is amazing because, like, it is a parody of The Craft. And
really?
Yes, and the animators on it actually did a 30-second shot-for-shot remake of The Craft. Like,
okay.
Look up X-Men Evolution The Craft and you will see some side-by-side shots. But the episode is about the girls on the X-Men team deciding they're going to start their own vigilante group called the Sirens, and so they're fighting guys in all black, and it's like chicks kicking ass kind of episode, but with the craft mixed in. It's a fun episode. But,
it's almost I think it just is rotoscoped.
Yeah, I mean it's when I say shot for shot. Yeah, I should have said
even the same people pass in front of them as they're walking down the hallway.
Yes, yeah. What do you expect them to draw a new thing that happens there? Or the person is obscure.
I don't know what's going on behind that person.
But yes, Wolverine gets cornered. He takes off his bike helmet only when he jumps off the bike, because I'm sure they had a very clear rule of like whenever he's on that bike, that helmet's on.
Is there a seatbelt on that bike? Oh, they don't have them? Draw one.
Now, this could be my old man corner of complaining about how they ruin comics with this stuff. But when I was growing up, Wolverine rode around on a motorcycle in comics with no helmet on because he'd say, I have a healing factor. I don't care. If I wipe out, my head fixes itself.
While smoking a big cigar.
Yeah, and he'd smoke a cigar and say, like, I have a healing factor. It is not a health risk to me. But that's, not the way I get it. He's a role model for the children. I understand. But instead, when Wolverine thinks he's going to get in a fight, we see Nick Fury of S.H.I.E.L.D. Savor this appearance, longtime fans, because this is one of the last times you'll see Nick Fury appear in something where he does not look like Samuel L. Jackson. So yeah, for 40 years, Nick Fury was an old white guy with an eye patch. That was his character design. But the ultimate Nick Fury was purposely drawn to look like Sam Jackson.
I'm revealing how little I know about Marvel stuff lately because I was thinking to myself, has Nick Fury shown up in anything? But I forgot he's Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes, yeah. Well, because it's not really.
Yeah.
It is Nick Fury. They're the same guy. But yes, classically, Nick Fury was played by David Hasselhoff a few years before this episode. But the ultimate Nick Fury fully overtook that character. There was a time when there was just, Ultimate Nick Fury looks like Sam Jackson. Marvel regular Nick Fury looks like the white guy. But then once they cast Sam Jackson as Nick Fury in Iron Man, then that was the end of old Nick Fury. Old Nick Fury went away. He became like a cosmic being or something. For a time, he became the Watcher, sort of. But anyway, this is one of the last times you'll see this version of Nick Fury. Then we get the very 2000 core opening.
Yeah, I mean, the font on the screen when they're introducing characters is just the worst. Like Microsoft Word art, I just dropped it into the image. And if you look at the original Saban series, they actually did a very good job of everybody's logo is different. Here, it felt like an afterthought. Put names on the screen.
Well, that was also the last time Saban would pay for, original animation for the opening.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see Wolverine, pop his... We're just talking about 92, but that opening is just great. Now, this one... I appreciate how it's just shot for shot in some cases with the Buffy opening. They're like, well, that's the Buffy opening.
I never thought of that. Okay.
Though they couldn't pay for a cool song. They just had whatever it was. But you do see some occasional really good animation in there. Like say when Jean Grey is walking or she looks up from her desk and her hair kind of moves around. That's all Steve Gordon. He said about the good animation in the opening. When we had to put together a title sequence and we hadn't received any footage back yet, we didn't know what level of animation we might be getting back from overseas. So we decided to hedge our bets by animating several of the shots here, mainly the close-ups, and shipping them overseas for in-betweens. So that's why there's some occasional sakuga in this opening here that by the third season kind of gets edited out because season 1 and 2 had the same opening. Season 3 and 4 is like a clip show mix opening. So you lose these great shots, sadly. And so, yes, after the opening, which introduces all the characters, you do see the Shadowcat dancing scene, which is just straight out of Buffy. I think he rotoscoped a Buffy scene. Then Logan is chatting with Fury, and he's told why he's being cornered.
Actually, you're going by Wolverine now, aren't you?
Fury. I got just one word for you. Goodbye.
Have it your way. Gunner, target that bike.
Okay, Patch, what's this about? I don't work with S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore.
Rebirth's been stolen.
Impossible. Rebirth was destroyed. Rogers and I made sure of it.
There was a backup. S.H.I.E.L.D. discovered it 17 years ago. Since it was kind of a touchy subject, we mothballed it under level 5 security.
And still it got stolen. Who did it?
Unknown. Whoever it was managed to do this to a titanium steel door, as well as knock out S.H.I.E.L.D. security with some kind of magnetic pulse. We're talking mutant here.
Magneto.
So it's called Operation Rebirth in the comics as well?
It is, yes, yeah. There's some stuff they fudge in the history of Captain America, but him getting the super soldier serum from Operation Rebirth is how it's always been, even from his first appearance. Also so in the comics, the super soldier serum is something nobody could ever unlock because in the comic books, it was made to be used on all American soldiers, but the inventor is murdered by a Nazi spy right after it works on Steve Rogers, and so they're never able to duplicate it, which is good because, this is getting ahead of ourselves, but I was shocked they actually touched on, isn't this making a master race, a super soldier serum?
I did like that little conversation. It's strange that that's as far as it goes, really.
Yeah, I mean, I was still shocked they even got to there, but yeah, it's especially how Wolverine's response, well, no, this was the good guys. It's But yes, there's also speaking of comic continuity, there's a cute little wink to the hardcore fans because Logan calls Nick Fury Patch. Now, when Wolverine in some comics goes undercover and has a secret identity and does secret agent adventures, he puts on an eye patch and calls himself Patch. So that's a wink towards Wolverine's alternate identity.
He's cosplaying as Nick Fury.
Kinda, yeah. So in the comics, it's just an excuse of like, if you saw Patch on the cover, then you know it's like, oh boy, it's the James Bond issue. Oh, so much fun. Wolverine won't even like pop his claws, probably. He'll play roulette.
No one wants to see that.
And yes, Magneto is the big bad of season 2. He didn't appear until the very end of season 1, and now in season 2, he's bigger than ever. And this is the way I like to have Magneto shown. You can't let Magneto get Skeletored. He has to be a big threat. In the comics, usually, they make it very clear that Magneto, most of the time, would beat the entire X-Men team because he is that powerful. Which, if you have full, total control of all magnetism, you are that powerful.
Yeah.
You are pretty strong.
So they really weaken him in this episode.
A bit, yes, yeah. And yet he still does win the fight in the end. But yes, after Wolverine gets his assignment from Nick Fury, we then get to meet our kids getting bullied at school.
Oh man, I totally tanked that history quiz. Why do we have to study World War II anyway?
Clear the road, losers.
I think the phrase you're looking for is pardon me.
What was that, skunkhead?
Oh, you're gonna push me around now? Please, lay a finger on me. We'll see what happens.
Trust me, not a good idea.
What? You think you're tough? Ah! What the heck are you? Some kind of rat?
Hey, look who's talking.
No way. No way. I'm gonna...
You're going to forget. You don't remember any of this. You're going to leave now.
Yeah. I'm going...
You okay?
Yeah. Growing up looking like this, I've heard it all before.
German, huh?
German, I'm telling you.
Sure.
His name's Kurt Wagner.
I see. Well, I did note the midriff on Jean Grey. This is a 2000 era show, and I'm happy women are no longer obligated to do that because it gets cold outside, ladies.
It's cold, yeah.
You want to cover that belly up.
Well, and also like even Rogue is like her outfit is so 90s as well. Like the
mesh.
A mesh see-through shirt with like kind of a bikini top underneath, or like sports bra, I guess. Like and also like I love her black lipstick and gloves and stuff, like, and also the little cleft in her chin, like it's a little like imperfection that I like in the character. And meanwhile, Kurt is just like, he's regular dude. If you were a boy in America back then, it's like, well, I need the baggiest of pants and at least a couple layers of t-shirts.
The shirt needs to be several sizes too big, and then you're right, several, like a long sleeve shirt under a short sleeve shirt under another long sleeve shirt, and then flannel on top.
Of course, flannel.
We both are wearing flannel.
Actually,
in this
we're
room.
still doing it right now, but mine is buttoned up. It isn't.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm very fancy today, buttoning up my flannel. Well, this also is a big change for Kurt as a character too, because his whole thing is that, one, in the comics, not only is he German, he's also Catholic, so he's full of Catholic guilt. Yeah, but in this show, they ditch the Catholicism, and much of his guilt, he's just a happy kid. But another thing they change is that in the comics, almost always, Kurt can never change his appearance, so he has to deal with being judged on how he looks at all times. But for the show, I guess to get away with like, well, he has to be in high school and he can't be like a blue guy with a tail, they invent a holographic wristband thingy that makes him look normal. And so the guy messes it up, and and I also say credit to the animators. In most episodes I watched, they don't break the rule that like, so the digital protection on Kurt is one thing, but he has 3 fingers, not 5.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't catch a time, I'm sure there were some, but I didn't catch a time where his 5 fingers separate. Like his 2 fingers are together most of the time like they are 1 finger.
Yeah, I wasn't explaining. I guess I would know if I had watched more of the show, but I was like, well, why did he change? I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah, it's by this point in the series, it was pretty well established. But yeah, if you just come in this episode, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I guess that's their reasoning for it. Like Rogue saying, why do I even have to learn about World War II? That's happened so long ago.
But there's no real comment from her at the end. Like, wow, I guess I know why this is so important now. Thanks, Wolverine.
Also, that guy who bullies them, they could have been like, you see, he's like Hitler invading your space. And you
have to say Hitler.
Yes, yeah. What are you, Hitler?
They can't say Hitler or Nazi.
Yes.
But they can't say master race.
Again, very shocking thing I love that. I also, it does seem kind of rude to change that guy's entire memory, but he was about to beat a woman in there. So that guy, maybe they fixed him. Who knows? But then we also get a very cutesy joke that really didn't make sense to me even until I looked it up. So the guy who's thanking a dog for helping him with homework, that's Multiple Man Jamie Madrox, and Wolfsbane is actually a mutant girl who can change from animal to person.
Okay.
And she's in her animal form.
I had no idea what was happening.
Yeah, that again, it feels like a very cutesy homework moment that Kids WB edict to them of like, can't we see the kids doing homework and they use their mutant powers to help them with homework?
More homework montages.
And then they then have that homework joke right before talking about like the master race. But yes, Xavier learns a thing or two about Captain America.
Perhaps you'd better tell me exactly what Operation Rebirth was.
Early attempt at genetic engineering. Crude but powerful. The idea was to create super soldiers for World War II.
A master race?
No, these were the good guys. They didn't mean it like that.
Yes, they never do, at first. So tell me, was it ever used on anyone?
Yeah. Steve Rogers.
So that is something that some 90s comics and 80s comics did deal with Captain America. Like when he's fighting literal Nazis, they'd say, hey, you know what? You're a blonde, blue-eyed Superman created by America. Like you're a Nazi dreamboat, Cap. And Cap would be like, yeah, well, I'm not a Nazi. Puncharoo.
We only made one of them.
But America wanted to make more. They just couldn't. But I did really like that Xavier's like, yeah, it was. They never do. They don't say like, well, we don't mean to create a master race, but since we're here, let's just go for it. But yes, another thing you may notice in this is that Captain America never says anything.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I don't know why. It could be strictly a budget thing of you can't cast another voice in this. You've maxed out your voice cast. Or it could be, my personal theory is they thought they could do a Cap spinoff. And so they're like, well, let's not cast the voice of him now. Just don't have him talk and we can cast whoever later.
This does feel like a backdoor pilot. So you're totally right about that.
So that's why I don't think he talks. But the story plays out well enough that you don't really notice he doesn't talk unless you know to look for it.
Yeah, until you pointed it out, I totally forgot. He doesn't say a word.
Because I watched a 10 things you never knew video about this series, and one of them was, oh, and David Hayter plays Cap. That's cool. I'm like, no, I got really mad at that because I'm like, no, he doesn't. This person got it mixed up with David Hayter played Cap in Spider-Man for Saban. He did not play Cap.
Should have reported that video to YouTube. Take it down.
Incorrect. Something's finally incorrect on YouTube. I must let them
demonetize it.
But yes, so we get a little flashback in sepia tone. Cap in his element, using his shield to first blind a German warplane. You can show a cross, which is like half of a swastika.
You can take out a Nazi plane in the air, but the guy has to parachute out.
Yes, yeah.
Please remember, we can't kill Nazis.
But it is a cool shot of his shield throw and then cutting the wing off the plane. That was neat.
It's very well animated. The vehicle animation is very nice on the show.
And we get to see that Wolverine knew him then, too. And, I talked about how Avalanche and Toad had their changed nationalities, but they are very clear that Wolverine was part of the Canadian forces in Europe, not with America. So you can see the maple leaf on his hat there, even. And, yes, this is the first time in the show they confirm that Logan is older than he looks.
Really? I knew you were older than you look, but World War II... Your regenerative powers are impressive. So is your memory, but I thought parts of your past were lost to you.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much right after that things get fuzzy.
Still, your story puzzles me. If Rogers was indeed the famed Captain America, that would seem to indicate the Rebirth project was successful.
No, it destroyed him. And now it's in the hands of Magneto.
That also is a change from the comics because the super soldier serum is never a problem for Steve Rogers. So it's not that it kills him. In the comic books, Steve Rogers gets frozen in a block of ice after World War II and he's
not intentionally, correct?
No. It was he's on a bomb with Bucky and they get separated on the bomb. The bomb explodes. Cap lands in the water and is flash frozen. So
that's how it works, folks.
Yeah, it's how it works. And the funny thing with the sliding timeline of Marvel Comics is that originally it was like he was frozen in 1945, unfrozen 1964, and now it just has to be like, well, Cap definitely was frozen in 1945, and he was unfrozen 10 years ago. It was just, whenever you're reading this, it was 10 years before that, which means in the sliding timeline, even though there were comics where Cap is like, knows about Nixon and Afghanistan and 9/11, now it has to be like, well, technically he got unfrozen in like 2011 now.
He doesn't even know about Obama. No, he barely knows.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I met Obama late in his second term after I got unfrozen. Nice guy. I like this guy. Instead of voting for Obama as he did, but that's that's that sliding timeline problem of Marvel Comics. But it also, Wolverine saying like, it gets fuzzy after that. That is the incredibly convenient amnesia that Logan suffered from for 20 years in the comics. They never knew what they wanted Wolverine's definite origin to be, so they'd always go like, well, he does remember this, and then they have to go like, oh, actually, that was a false memory implanted in by Weapon X or whatever.
If you need an idea for a story, Wolverine can remember something.
I think they realized right after this series ended, in 2005, Joe Quesada, who is the editor-in-chief of Marvel, he made the edict of like, we're doing the definite Wolverine origin, and he gets all of his memories back, and we are done with amnesia. Like, no more Wolverine amnesia. So now for 17 whole years, Wolverine has not had amnesia and knows his origin. But we're still in Amnesia Town for Wolverine. So we head to Cerebro, the magic mutant finding device. Then they talk about how no way mutants are going to be under wraps for much longer. That's hinting at that how this season will end with an outing of the mutants. Mutants are a secret in the first 2 seasons, and then the world learns of mutants in season 3. Then in a very cutesy way, Rogue and Nightcrawler sneak in to see what's going on. But at least I will say credit to the writer. They explain why. They see there's a little brown out and they're like, oh, that means Cerebro turned on. Let's go check it out. So
that's a good way to get him in the room.
At least they don't just magically appear like Orko or Snarf in a room like, and Snarf will come too. They work harder than that. But yes, they are having trouble finding Magneto, and Rogue has an idea.
Come in, Rogue. Cut.
You know, you could wait for a girl to volunteer.
No time. Spill it.
Remember when I touched old Buckethead in New York? I got a dose of memories. They're kind of confused, but one's like this big metal dome half buried in rocks.
Where?
The Sahara Desert.
Well, that narrows it down to about 3.5 million square miles. You could maybe be a little more specific, could you?
I'm sure I could recognize some landmarks.
You are not going along.
Then you ain't finding it. Besides, from what I can figure out, nobody can get through that dome without the power of magnetism.
Or
teleportation! Yes! The Fuzzy Man is on the mission.
I still maintain he's German. I'm just saying. Like, yes.
The guy's trying. He's trying.
There's something to the. I talked about how Nightcrawler's all Catholic guilt normally in the series, or he's like, I'm a freak. No one likes me. In this show, he is the like, woohoo, I'm the fun guy. Yay, party time.
I do like that. Henry, you're better at the German accent than this actor.
Thank you. I also, listening very closely, I feel like I heard a Canadian oot out of Rogue there.
Yeah.
Then you ain't finding him. You ain't But yeah, I like that Rogue is like a jerk. Like that's, she's had a hard life, that Rogue, in and out of foster care, an abusive mother. This is something too, they'll hint at it a little bit. This show did longer linear storytelling than a lot of shows were doing in 2002, at least kid shows. And they hint at it later. At this point, Kurt knows that his mom is Mystique, the blue shape-shifting lady who also raised Rogue and was her like foster mom. So in a way, Rogue and Kurt are like brother and sister. They so that's why they're paired together in this episode as well. And
they're a good pair.
Though I would say as a kid, if I'd seen this when I was 10, this would have pissed me off because I would be like, I like Wolverine. Why are the dumb kids coming with Wolverine on his cool adventure?
That is true. Yeah, it does feel like the relatable characters for the children to, relate to.
Yeah, but at least I will say they give good storyline reasoning for it. Not just that, like, well, you have to bring them. Like, they could have just had Xavier say, Wolverine, bring them along to let them learn something. But instead, they're like, well, Rogue's the only person who would recognize where it is, and Kurt's the only person who can get inside of it. So there you go.
Yeah, it's not like they're hiding in the trunk of the Mach 5 or whatever on this adventure.
God, you're right. In spirit, it's definitely similar to
yes.
then as the scene ends, we get another very 2000 core thing of just weird edit together of flashes of scenes you've seen over like white, and it's so distracting. And then we also get a very weird thing of them going like, some team, a team of two, a team of two, a team of two.
This town is a part of us all, a part of us all, a part of us all.
Yes, that is when, again, the first time I watched this, they don't use the word concentration camp or say, what this is, but clearly to any viewer with a slight understanding of history, they know where they end up.
They say prisoners of war. What kind of prisoners? I don't know. What war? You figure it out.
When and where, that's the read a book, kids. But yes, Wolverine and Cap get sent in to free a bunch of prisoners. They're not even giving parachutes. And this was the one bit where I finally was like, oh yeah, Steve isn't talking here, because I feel like the guy who's giving them their orders, it should just be Steve saying, hey, Wolverine, we got to go in here and free this prison camp. But not so. And yes, they actually show like concentration camp guards and people in there like kept in their small lodging. Like, it's harsh. It's shocking. And yes, as they free some folks, one of the kids that they're fighting their way out with stops several classic World War II grenades from being hitting them, and they fly up into the air and explode. There's a really good explosion. Like, Madhouse did this one, and then really good anime explosions in here. This is when you find out it's Magneto, which had always been a part of his character in the comics. Well, when I say always, I mean, I think it was more established in the 80s, but a long time part of his character. Though that also is a problem for him, because when they write that in 1980, that like, oh yeah, this guy was 10 in 1944.
Yeah.
It makes him like, oh yeah, he looks like 50. By even 2000, it's like, wait, this guy's 80s?
Yeah,
70s?
he's in his 70s, and it's like, well, I guess he could still be a villain if he gets into the chamber enough times.
They keep having to invent that thing because it is incredibly important to Magneto's character that he's like, to be a Holocaust survivor with his level of power, it shows that it changed him to be like, I've seen what happens if you let people be persecuted. I, with my mutant powers, will not allow that to happen to the mutant people like it was done to my people in Europe in the 40s. So it's just so key to his character. You can't take it away. And it's a weird balance, because you don't want to use the Holocaust too much for your big action film and your action figure characters. But if you take it away, then it's like it is kind of an erasure. They're in a sticky situation with Magneto. I think too, maybe they got away with it in this because the first scene of the first X-Men movie is Magneto revealing his powers at a camp. And so I think they were able to be like, well, it was in the movie, so we can do that.
And that was a PG-13 movie, right?
Yes, yeah. And that age range totally fits for Ian McKellen playing Magneto. Not so much these days, though. Also, I mean, if you watch those flashback movies, 20 years pass in those films, and every actor looks 2 years older. They do not.
That's true.
But yes, they end up saving a kid. And what's that kid's name?
What's your name, son?
Eric Laneshare. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for saving us.
So,
Thank you
Commander,
for saving us.
clarify the operation particulars while we mentally prep.
What?
He wants to know why Magneto wants this Rebirth thing anyway.
Back in World War II, we saw it in action with Captain America. He must have researched it afterward.
There! Head east past that ridge of rock.
So, if Rebirth made such great heroes, why was Captain America the only one?
Because greatness ain't supposed to come that easy, Elf. There was a price to pay. The procedure had a flaw in it for humans. Cellular breakdown. Captain America was dying.
So when Magneto said his name, I did go to the wiki.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know. I mean, I knew it was him just because of the things I know about Magneto, but I was like, why is that name significant?
It's not the name they'd make up for him if they were doing it now. But yeah, Eric Laneshare is his real name. For years in the comics, he didn't have a real name. I knew this from... I wasn't even that big of a regular X-Men reader, but in the early 90s, I got into collecting the Marvel trading cards. And in the original, like in the first run of trading cards, they're like, Magneto, real name, unknown. And then by like 93, they're like, yeah, his name's Eric Laneshare. Like, or Laneshare?
I went to the wiki, and he has a lot of names. Max is one of them?
Yes, yeah. Well, so He's also he also got de-aged and amnesiafied for a time. He also took on multiple other names while hiding out. Magneto has lots of names, yes. He's a crazy character, Magneto is. It's also because Claremont especially never wanted Magneto to be a villain, like a cackling evil villain. Like he wants to be a guy that you mostly would be like, he makes some good points. Like that's what he always wanted Magneto to be. And even sometimes in Claremont's run, Magneto just became a good guy and a member of the X-Men. So he never wanted him to be too evil. And that's also why, to tell so many different stories with him, that's why he created 5 different alternate identities for Magneto in the series. But yes, Linsher is his real name, or his birth name, I guess I should say. And after all of that story, we then get to see the characters jump on the very toyetic XTVs.
Before that, there was a very gratuitous crotch and butt shot of Rogue putting the bomb on her hip.
What are you talking about? It's just to show her the shiny belt she's wearing.
She turns around. I mean, it's just her crotch and her butt.
No, they wouldn't. The directors of this show, no way would they get away with that.
Yeah, the XTVs, just like saying the name of the toy.
Yes, yeah.
The term XTV is ridiculous. They're ATVs with X-Men on them.
It feels like Charles Xavier was like, I gotta have some branding in here. Like he cares about his X brand to an absurd degree.
Get the XTVs. the what?
Yeah. Why would Wolverine say the brand name of it? He'd be just like, get the things. Let's ride up, whatever. But yes, you're right. A very gratuitous shot of the girl putting on the bomb on her belt. Also, it's kind of interesting that they wrote that Captain America agreed he didn't want the military to have this deadly program that could be used on others, so they destroy it. I really like that. It is, anti-imperialist in a way, even, that Captain America's like, no government could be trusted with it, even the American government, and it would only kill other people like it's killing him. Not how it works in the comics, but an interesting twist here to explain why Captain America vanished after World War II in this universe. So they suit up, they get on their XTVs, they put on their helmets because they're good little boys and girls.
It's a cool scene, but with all these action scenes like this, I just don't know how they're dodging missiles.
Yes, yeah. Well, also, who's even throwing those missiles? Is Magneto throwing missiles at them?
I guess we don't see where the missiles are coming from either. Yeah, I mean, it's fun animation, but it's a little silly.
Yeah, very silly. Also, when they hit the dunes, and there's no effect on the dunes, it's like, well, I see the budget coming through here too. I did like the line though of good attitude, bub, just don't drop that bomb. And with that stirring motivational speech, and also again, Kurt is just like, wahoo, this is so fun. That feels like them telling the kids yeah, this is fun, right?
And also, hey, let's lighten this story up. We got all these Auschwitz scenes and World War II. Let's have the guy saying, let's rock and ride.
Yeah, maybe too, they make those scenes to be like, we need to put these in the commercials for X-Men today. Let's rock and ride. They then even have a really well conceived action bit of them launching into the air, and they have to teleport through that wall or they're going to hit it, and Nightcrawler struggling to grab Wolverine because Nightcrawler's power is he has to touch people for them to teleport with him, and so when he does, they barely make it. I like that. It's nice and intense. And I also better than getting squeegeed off the dome outside.
Squeegee's a fun word.
It is.
I don't hear it as much anymore. It's a fun comedy word is squeegee.
Yeah, I guess people don't squeegee things, or if they were to use it, it'd just be wipe it down or something. Use the wiper. And then, just to make things even more fun, we get a Wolverine Sabretooth fight as soon as they get inside.
I'm not complaining, but that came out of nowhere. Just oh, he's here. Okay.
Sabretooth had been working with Magneto in other episodes, but it really was it is a fight quotient thing.
Yeah, I guess if Magneto's going to be vulnerable, you might as well have someone guarding the room.
Well, on Sabretooth, again, this was one of those things as a kid when I was reading them. I always loved a Wolverine Sabretooth fight because they'd stab the crap out of each other. Yeah. But here they just can't. This was the problem on the 92 show as well. But of course I had toys. I had so many toys. Yeah. As a kid growing up, I had a Wolverine toy and a Sabretooth toy, and I loved to make them fight slash, 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 slash. It was so much fun. And unfortunately in this show, though, all the Wolverine can do is they can kind of push each other to other sides of the room and like drop things.
Lots
on
of
each other.
girders, cutting down girders.
So many girders. He's like, you could never beat me, Runt. Well, I've been working out. And he cuts down a thing that falls on him. It's just like the Ninja Turtles. He can only make a thing fall down.
Lots of chandeliers. I do like when he throws the girder, like the girder lands on Sabretooth, he kicks it at Wolverine, and Wolverine like cuts it in half as it flies at him. That's cool. That's a cool little scene.
Yeah, at least you can occasionally get to see Wolverine cut some stuff up good. It's better. Later in this season, he fights a Sentinel, and it's finally like, God, Wolverine can finally cut the shit out of something.
That's, again, with Ninja Turtles, that's why they were smart to make all of the enemies robots.
Yes.
They can use their weapons.
They can destroy those little Mousers 8 million times in the show. At the time of this recording, they just debuted that new TMNT throwback game, and the opening cartoon is just them destroying the shit out of robo enemies.
That does look cool. It's a shameless nostalgia grab, but whatever. It's fine.
Hey, I'll grab that nostalgia all day long. It's
been a long year.
It is
Take
weird.
me to 1992.
Well, that's also strange too that we're coming on like the 10-year cycle of it, because we already had this nostalgia like actually like in 08 or 07.
They're like, why don't we do that again?
Yeah, these guys will still buy it. Now they're almost 40 instead of almost 30. They'll buy this.
We'll see you in 10 years.
When you're almost 50 and it's still another throwback. And you can show it to your grandkids if you had any. Anyway, yes. Yeah, Magneto, he also is flinging girders around to stop people. And that's when Nightcrawler heads over to the tube that has a mysterious person inside. And I like the Nightcrawler's just like, no, I'm doing this to save you. This will kill you if you're in the Rebirth. But that's when he learns it's not as it seems.
Magneto?
This chamber is going to save my life.
What happened to you?
I'm an old man. My genetic enhancements have kept me alive until now. But this rebirthing chamber is my last chance to survive.
But this thing's supposed to be dangerous.
Only to humans. To us, it grants long life by destroying those controls. You take away my only chance. Are you that much like your mother?
Kurt, forget him. Just get on with it.
What are you waiting for, kid? Pull the pin!
So, yeah, when he says you're so much like your mother, he means that Mystique tried to kill him before. So that's why he's getting in Nightcrawler's head. Pretty sneaky of him. But that, again, explains, at least they have an in-universe explanation of, like, well, why hasn't Magneto looked old before this? Oh, well, those genetic enhancements wore off in between episodes. Now he looks his age.
He's got to visit that chamber all the time.
Why? So I'm guessing what happens here is he gets enough of the chamber that it ages him down to, like, 40. And then it gets destroyed. And so he isn't given like forever life. But yeah, Kurt should be punished more for letting Magneto live in that.
He's killed thousands.
And he'll kill only more for it. But yeah, I like them both yelling at him like, come on, kid, stop.
That was some good yelling from Scott McNeil.
Yeah, Scott McNeil's one of the best yellers
Pull
around.
the pin!
Yeah. We talked about it on our one for Gundam Wing, but when him as Duo doing that, no, like he has one of like the craziest nose you ever heard. Tears his throat apart, but he's great. And yes, we do a little, again, Wolverine, how does he take out Sabretooth? Well, he kicks him into a thing that electrocutes.
Those things are everywhere when you have a fight scene. Just like, oh, there's the electrical panel. Get close to that. Okay, you're done.
That's so weird that for all the rules that the standards and practices as are like, well, sure, you can shove a guy into a thing that electrocutes him into unconsciousness. I guess like kids won't be near a transformer that would do that, I suppose.
That reminds me, I've been watching the Disney show, also on Disney Plus, Big City Greens, the comedy show. And there's a joke about a character almost putting a fork in an electrical outlet. I'm surprised that made it onto the air.
Wow, yeah, dang. I can't believe they would.
Unlike Maggie in the Simpsons shorts, he doesn't get shocked and likes it, but it's just like he's approaching it with the fork.
Wow, man.
Giving kids ideas.
On Craig of the Creek, there was a bit where they got to a point where a character has to boil water, but the standards and practices edicts are do not show kids how to use things in the kitchen by themselves. And so instead they go like, well, you have to turn on the water, but we're not allowed to touch the stove without a parent. And then the burner turns itself on magically, and they're like, oh, good. And then so
that's like the like the purple fire on OKKO?
Exactly, yes.
Or blue or whatever color it is.
They got away. I think they did fire of all colors. They did green flames too, though. Like, as long as it's not red, it's okay. Then it's magic fire. But yes, Wolverine eventually gets out from under it. He pulls the pin on it to make it explode and gets Magneto out of it so he doesn't die in the explosion. I had a little giggle that Wolverine, instead of pulling it out with his finger, pops his claws and pulls out the pin with his claw. Like, that made
It's
me
a nice
laugh.
touch.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the show is wrapping up, but that bomb has like a 2-second timer.
Yes.
It's not long enough.
And also, they're in an enclosed space. Like, in the real world, about an explosion that big going off, there's no air anymore in that room. All the oxygen's gone.
Thankfully, you can run from most explosions in this world.
Yeah, in most Marvel comic worlds, you can run away from any explosion. Heat, flame, oxygen, burns, none of that matters. You know, I should have said it earlier. I really do like the Wolverine costume in these seasons. Like, we had the yellow costume in the 92 show.
Yeah.
But in the comics, he was wearing his brown costume, which was way cooler. I always preferred his brown costume as a kid. Though by season 4, Wolverine is in like a fully black costume that makes him look more like the Hugh Jackman Wolverine than the comic Wolverine. That shows you how big the movies are getting.
Those costumes are pretty boring, though.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad we're at least farther away from those. Like, MCU, they have a mix of like, no, this is a costume-ass costume, and then sometimes they're like, well, it's like lightly colored leather. Like, that's
Don't be ashamed of what you're making.
It's enough in the past that I don't feel like this is a giant spoiler now. But in WandaVision, Wanda finally got a real costume instead of like a red trench coat. Like, that was Wanda's costume in the MCU for such a long time. By the end of WandaVision, she finally wears a real costume, which I hope she sticks with when she appears in Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. Which
won't be forgettable.
It's directed by Sam Raimi, so I have hopes.
WandaVision was a be sure to drink your Ovaltine kind of deal. It's a crummy commercial.
Well, yes. I don't want to spoil too much, but some people were very disappointed. I knew going in it was only going to give you so much, but it was fine. It was fine. It was fun to watch a parody of Malcolm in the Middle. Is like, this is actually a throwback now. But though I wish they would have. So on WandaVision, they did a thing for every decade of like, oh, what was a popular family sitcom each decade? I Love Lucy, Bewitched. Well, it was Bewitched and Dick Van Dyke. Then 70s with Brady Bunch. 80s was Facts of Life and Full House. And then 90s, they skipped straight to 1999 with Malcolm in the Middle. I wish that sounds too expensive, but if they'd done an animated episode that was The Simpsons, that would have been pretty great.
I was also thinking that, or make like a Ribald Fox sitcom.
Yeah,
Married with Children or something. Yeah.
But didn't do that. I also saw people, a funny critique of it was like, what are the values of this show? It's like, well, Wanda's dream is to be a normal housewife. It's like, oh, that seems kind of demeaning to her when you put it that way. Anyway, look, it was fine. It's fine. At this point, when you're listening to this, we're deep into Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier, the newest MCU show, which I'm sure that definitely is not as anti-imperialist as this episode of X-Men Evolution is.
Well, the next thing is like we've had our tale about Auschwitz. We've had our dying old man being rescued. Why don't they fight a dinosaur for 40 seconds?
Well, yeah, it's a metal dinosaur.
Right.
Yeah,
but still, it's just like, sure.
It's funny that with all the things Magneto can do, especially against, say, Wolverine, who has a metal skeleton, all he wants to do is like, you know what? I'm going to make a giant girder beast that will try to eat you guys.
I made a really cool dinosaur.
Pretty neat, huh? Yeah, it's it does give Wolverine something he can cut up. And then I had just a little giggle at like, well, Kurt takes a pole, teleports on top of its head, and like clangs against it, and it's instantly swatted.
What are you going to do? Like stab its brain? It's a bunch of girders.
He's not the most combat trained character, and so yes, all of them get caught. They're easily defeated. Magneto's gonna kill him, but then Magneto decides not to.
It seems I have you at my mercy. However, you spared my life, so I will spare yours. There was a small boy in Poland who owes you that much.
What small boy in Poland?
It's a long story, and I ain't got time for it now.
Why? Isn't this mission officially over?
Not yet. I gotta pay a visit to an old friend.
I like that Kurt's even like, isn't this episode done? I mean, we wrapped up everything.
I mean, the Rogue needs to know about World War II. She failed her test. This is your time to tell her all about it.
This is a teaching moment for you, Wolverine.
Yeah.
You whiffed on it.
What happened in Poland? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like, Kurt, you really should know about this
Yeah.
stuff. So something I thought was really clever was that they first frame it when Magneto says, "You spared my life." In that shot, it's just him and Kurt. So I think you're supposed to think he's saying, "Oh, Kurt, you let me use Rebirth enough to de-age, so you spared my life." And then instead, it pulls out to show, no, he's talking to Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Yes, I remember, Wolverine. You saved me from the concentration camp."
That was good staging for that reveal.
What's not so great is the very prolonged smirk shot of Logan, like just
Yeah.
it like zooms in on him. It's like this should be like 2 seconds shorter. It's a little long.
I think they had time to burn.
Yeah, I think so.
The show came back short.
Well, they only have 30 seconds for the credits, which the credits that are on Disney Plus, I bet never aired once on Kids WB.
Oh no, they were smashed to the side of the screen. You saw what was happening on Pokemon next time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, coming up after this. Like, because, yeah, if you had what the credits are on this, like, black background with just drawings of the characters, Kid would change the channel to Fox in a second.
I think they made these credits knowing that they would be altered.
They're just in case, like, look, if you want vanilla credits when you buy this in syndication later, here they are. But otherwise, feel free to shove them to the side and scream over them. But yes, we then get one last scene. We see the Captain America is frozen, not exactly in a block of ice, but in suspended animation. So just so you know, he's not dead. And that's where it definitely feels like their way of saying spin-off.
It's got a real Mr. Freeze kind of dynamic there.
Well, I like to think then that Logan and Steve had more. They were more than friends in World War II. I mean,
I was getting hints of that.
In a way, they're also just like, well, yeah, they're old World War II buddies. They were united and they knew each other in Berlin, and that's a friendship you never forget. But yes, Logan says goodbye to his old chum.
It's been a long time, Cap. But I'm still fighting the good fight. Today we had a victory. For you. You gotta know we'll find that cure. I promise you that. 'Cause you and me, we made a great team. Yeah. I'll be here when you get out.
It's time to go, Logan. And do remember, you were never here.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the routine.
I think McNeil plays that really well. Like, I think especially if you want to think that they were more than friends, he's like, you and me, we're a pretty good team. Like, I just also, he's like kind of, Wolverine's like choking back tears, like, yeah, I know the routine. Tough guys can cry too, like Logan.
So many layers, this Wolverine.
Yeah, he's a deep guy, Wolvie. I like that. He's not just a badass. Like, but yes, a cute ending of Wolverine saying goodbye to his friend Cap, and this was a really good adventure, especially if you're a hardcore Marvel fan who's not as into the teen high school hijinks. This is much more of a classic Marvel story.
Yeah, it feels like it's totally not an episode of this show. It's just what if Wolverine had a special?
Yes, I mean, it does also. You've got the kids with him. You get some Rogue and Nightcrawler stuff.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I just wish maybe there'd be one more scene before the final one where it's Rogue like passes her test or whatever. It's just like, I learned so much about World War II.
You're right. Those characters should have learned a little something more.
Yeah.
It makes it very much not even a little bit their story.
They have questions at the end. He's like, I tell you nothing.
Yeah, it's a long story and I ain't got time for it. I really appreciate Royce for picking this one because it was a show I'd never really given a chance until, honestly, a couple of years ago. My husband like, no, it's actually good. And this got me to watch a bunch of it. I watched like 8 episodes. I watched all the season finales and including the series finale. And there's some really good stuff. There's also like some dumb episodes that even the biggest fans of the show will be like, I don't want to watch the episode where Cyclops Cyclops and Havoc are stuck on a raft for a whole episode.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And there's some very cheesy ones. Also, Spike is a bad character. But yes, when it gets good, it really does capture what's great about the mutants and the X-Men. And now I am nostalgic for 2000 Core. Sadly.
Yeah, I'm happy I got a chance to watch this because I assumed it was fine, but, I just wasn't watching these kind of shows then. But yeah, it's all on Disney Plus. If you want more X-Men and are waiting for them to make their grand return, this is totally fine to watch.
Oh, yes, yeah. So thanks again to premium patron Royce for picking this one. I am all you have really good picks, and this was another great one.
Yes, thank you to Royce. If you want to be cool like Royce and get all these episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free and support the show, please go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up there, you'll get just that, but also access to all of our limited miniseries and everything behind the $5 paywall we've done for the past nearly 4 years of this Patreon. And if you sign up now, we are currently right in the middle of our newest miniseries for 2021, Talking of the Hill Season 2 Part 1. That's 11 new episodes of Talking of the Hill. That's going to run through May towards the end of early June. 11 new episodes, like I said. And you can listen to all of our previous episodes of Talking of the Hill behind the $5 paywall. And there is so much more going on behind the scenes. Too much to list here, but there is also a $10 level. If you sign up for that, you get all the $5 stuff, but also access to one mega-long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
You're talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. Each month on the free feed where you're listening to this, you get to hear the extended preview, but you can only hear the full things, often over 4 hours long, of me and Bob talking about an animated feature film in the same style if you're a $10 and up subscriber at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Just last week, if you're on the free feed, you got to hear us talk about Shrek. 20 years of Shrek. Oh, goodness. That was a ton of fun. The month before, we talked about DuckTales, the movie, and so many before that we had a ton of fun talking about. If you like this anime-ish talk, I think you'd like us talking about the end of Evangelion for 5 whole hours. Or if you like the superhero stuff, I know you'd like our ones about Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So many great ones you get with all the other $5 stuff. So please sign up today at the $10 a month level to get it all at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast is Retronauts. It's a classic gaming podcast about old video games. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, or go to patreon.com/Retronauts. Sign up there for 2 exclusive full-length episodes every month. Again, that is patreon.com/Retronauts. Henry, how about you?
I'm HENREYG on Twitter. Follow me there for all your Henry Gilbert updates, HENREYG. Also, if you're following both of us on Twitter, please follow the official Twitter account of our network of podcasts at Talk Simpsons Pod. When you want to know when new stuff happens on What a Cartoon, Talking Simpsons, any of our exclusives on the Patreon, or other cool news in our lives, you will stay up to date if you follow at Talk Simpsons Pod on Twitter. So please do that today.
Thank you so much for listening, folks. We'll see you next time for the Rocky and Bullwinkle episode, Rue Britannia, and we'll see you then.
Oh, this is so cool. We're on a mission. Hey, let's have an official briefing.
Spare me.
What? I'm up to this. You and me, we're a team.
Big whoop. A team of 2. A team of 2. A team of 2.
A team of 2. A team of 2. A team of 2. Specifically, you two. Cap, I think you've met Logan. He's with Canadian Special Forces. From what I hear, he's almost as tough as you are, which is a good thing. Mission parameters? You're going to liberate a POW camp in Poland, but for the safety of the prisoners, it has to be fast. Real fast. How fast is real fast? Put it this way. You don't get parachutes.